With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Terry to run us through.
Very good. Thanks for the introduction there, Ed. So this is Terry Simpson. I'm a technical evangelist over at Nintex, and I've been working with the platform for a good number of years. I worked on the consulting side for probably 10 years, and over those 10 years, I think I worked 8, maybe 9 years working with the Nintex suite of tools, doing a lot of implementations. And that's kind of what brings me here today, talking a little bit about the platform. So today we're going to go through and talk a little bit about the evolution of forms, talk a little bit about the current state or current situation that we're in around forms today, and then a couple things that you want to consider when you move from one form platform to another. And then I want to spend the majority of the time today in a demonstration showing you a little bit around the Nintex Forms suite. We'll spend majority of time doing that demonstration and then get into some closing thoughts and some Q&A. And I encourage you guys as we're going along to ask questions as we get into this. So a little bit around the history. When I think about forms, I mean, we've always seen, I shouldn't say always, but we've always had forms in some type of scenario, whether you think about writing on tablets and evolving into paper and and probably in my lifetime, getting into things like Adobe Forms and being able to fill out those within that tool. And, the evolution of computers has brought us into this online forms realm. And it's really changed a lot over the years. I even think back to 2010 when Nintex introduced forms for the very first time. And things have even changed a lot, even with the Nintex suite of tools. So a lot of changes that have been going on, and the technology has just been increasing over the years. I know with our form suite, at least within the Nintex Workflow Cloud, we're releasing new features every 2 weeks. It's just constant changes that keep coming, which is great for end users out there of the platform. So kind of a good look at some of the history there. I wanted to next focus a little bit on some of the characteristics around some of the forms solutions that we have out there. And, and I think some of the key things that most people want to see, at least today, is good data connectivity. It's not just about having data within SharePoint or whatever solution that you're using. We need to be able to connect that data to other sources, because in most organizations their data is spread around the organization. In an ideal situation, we want to be able to take that data and pull it from those multiple locations and bring it into one really nice end user experience. And I think at the end of the day that's really, really important. Also needs to be intelligent and have rules within it as well. I think this is really important because you can imagine forms that you fill out. I know this week we're doing benefits enrollment, and based upon some of the options that I've selected around additional life insurance and that kind of thing, I'm filling out literally physical pieces of paper due to some of the vendors that we're working with and life insurance vendors. And I literally fill out that physical piece of paper and scan it and send it in. And one of the things I thought about this week is that form had a lot of information in there that I really didn't need to fill out, because a lot of the fields didn't pertain to what I was requesting, but it had to be on there because for some people filling out the form, they needed to fill out the information. So in a good form that you have in an ideal situation, you'll have rules on there. So for instance, excuse me, apologize for that. For instance, if I'm filling out a form and I've never smoked, then I don't need to see 2 or 3 different options below that. If yes, then do X. Let's go ahead and hide those fields. That way they're not taking up any space on the form. So based upon responses, that may change outcomes that are there. Also, it needs to be extremely intuitive, be able to get it to the form on any device and also any browser. And we've helped out in that way around our ability to have a mobile app and that really is helpful in that environment, so that you can get access to the form on that mobile app, fill it out on the app or in the browser, and just make it super intuitive, so there really is no explanation. So what brings us to this webinar today, and one of the reasons why we're doing this? Well, there's a lot happening around the form space, especially around the Microsoft space. Most of you on this call know that Microsoft's retiring InfoPath, and it's going to be going away, and no replacement has been formally announced as far as a form solution. And so a lot of users are looking for a tool to transition to and to leverage as their form tool going forward. And so support for that InfoPath tool will be going away here in 2021. When I put this deck together, someone put it in the context of months, and I got thinking about that a little bit. And you've got 2019, which is literally days away, than 2020. So we're talking 24 months before we're into 2021. So it's definitely coming quick. So it's a great time to think about what forms solution you're using today, what you're going to be using in the future, and really what's your conversion plan going into the future. And it doesn't have to be just InfoPath. I know a lot of users I run into that are on Lotus Notes, and they're transitioning off of Lotus Notes, and they have a lot of apps within Lotus Notes, and they need a solution which will involve forms for that as well. So a lot of form solutions out there. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about the Nintex suite and some of the options that you have when you go to transition. So I want to talk next about the top 5 practices that I put on here that you should sit down and think about before you start to transition to any form solution that you select, especially around Nintex Forms, but also any form that you're looking to consider. And one of the things I'd encourage you, and I'm hoping you get a couple nuggets of information over here on the left-hand side, starting on the left-hand side, is around examining your processes today. You may have processes that have been around for many years, and you may not have reevaluated those processes to see if they're the correct process and the correct flow today. I've worked with a few clients in the healthcare arena, and we've talked about the registration process when you go in for surgery, or maybe it's your first time visiting a doctor, and what that registration process is and the flow that happens in that interaction. And if you reevaluate what you're doing with forms today, it can kind of change that process and the workflow that you have around it. And so you think about that process and what type of form you may need. Now, the other thing too is that we also need to look at cleaning up your data. I'm probably one to admit, when it comes to my personal data, I think about all the pictures that I take and the data that I keep around technology, not physical pieces of paper, but data. I tend to be a little bit of a hoarder with that data, and I want to keep it all. And especially when it comes to data, it's a little bit easier to hide. It's not like I'm a hoarder in my household. I'm physically, if I was, I'd be physically presented or faced with that content and that information every day, and it's very easy when you're faced with it to clean it up. But with data, it's almost like you can, put a lot of it under the rug and you never see it, out of sight, out of mind. And I know a lot of times I'm guilty of that, but I think businesses in general are guilty of that, so it's a great idea to kind of clean up your data. Also focused on who your end users are. Are they IT staff? Are they sales end users, corporate users, external users? I think one of the big things you need to understand is who are those users, and making sure you're focusing your form on those individuals, and make sure that you're meeting their expectations. If it's sales folks and they're out in the field, you're probably going to need some type of mobile platform so that you can have offline access to forms as well. And also get feedback from them, because it's not a scenario where you just simply build it for the first time and then release it, get feedback and change it, because within these tools, especially the ones we're going to see today, it's very easy to modify it. And then the other thing too is simplicity. Keep it simple. For those on the webinar today that have used InfoPath in the past, and you have forms today in InfoPath, I'm sure this statement will probably resonate with you, but I've seen a lot of forms that have started out fairly simple, and over time they really turned into applications, where instead of just having 10, 15 fields on the form, it's literally an application where users have initial input, internal staff come in and process requests, and you have feedback loops, and the user's coming back again and again and again, and it's literally an application. So I encourage you to keep it simple, keep the simplicity there. Try not to let things grow too much into an application, and if it does, evaluate if the format of a form is the right process. And I know a lot of folks that have put hours, hundreds of hours into forms, especially InfoPath forms, really making them into applications and really pushing the envelope sometimes a little too much. But definitely something to think about. And then obviously do a lot of testing. Definitely you should do some good testing to make sure that things are going well and that your end users have a good experience. So next we're going to talk about some benefits of using the Nintex Form suite, because that's what we're going to focus on today, and using our tool in order to allow you to build out those forms. Now, one of the things that we've really prided ourselves on at Nintex is that we've tried to make all of the tools that we make available super, super easy to use, and done in a no-code type of way, so that project managers, business analysts, they have the capability of coming out and building and managing and designing their own forms, and really empowering those individuals in the business to do it. So it's very easy to build out a form, and you're going to see that today. And it's fairly easy to build out a somewhat sophisticated form in an easy way. A lot of advanced logic that's out there, the ability to capture data pretty much on any device. Almost all of our form building tools, or at least the ones I'm going to show you today, are all responsive, so that you can capture that data on any device. And that responsive design is what allows us to do that, because we don't care what browser you're rendering the form on, it's going to react in the proper way. And then ultimately, you're going to come in and leverage Nintex Forms to power the automated process behind the scenes. So one of the things we're not going to get into too much today is the automation once you submit the form. But the form is typically the trigger to initiate a process. And in most scenarios, you're going to want a workflow behind the scenes that will help the automation and make it very consistent. So it could be as easy as a sign-in form at the receptionist desk when you walk into your business. Nintex form available on an iPad sitting right there at the desk, and you can sign in for who you are here to see. Maybe it prints out your badge. Workflow then sends a text message to the individual that you're there to see, and that way if they're wandering around the office, they're getting that text message. Or maybe somebody's there to see you and you're out for lunch, you're still going to get that notification. So a lot of things to think about when we get into Nintex Forms and some of the things we're going to look at today. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in, and I want to show you a couple forms today in one or two of our designer tools, and how easy it is to build out forms within the Nintex suite of tools. Now, one of the things to consider is where and what environment are you using? Nintex started out many years ago in the on-prem realm of SharePoint, which we are still there today. I'm going to show you an example of that. But we also reside within Office 365, which you'll see here. And then we also have a workflow engine that's disconnected from SharePoint, which we call the Nintex Workflow Cloud. And I'll show you an example of that as well and some of the benefits. But I wanted to start right within the SharePoint ecosystem first. And you'll see here that we have a pretty basic list here around commercial advertising. And if I wanted to go and create a new quote for an advertising, I would be able to come out and just click on New Item, and I would be presented with the Nintex form, which it overrides the out-of-the-box SharePoint form. So we'd be able to come out and create this form, put a company in here, ABC Corporation, identify a package that we wanted to select for that advertising. So let's say we wanted to do the gold package. And notice here that we have some logic built in where we're calculating this value. And I'm going to show you how we did all this in the back end just a second. But you'll see when we select the gold package, the price is $6,000 versus the silver package is $4,000. Also, we can come out here, select a building that we want to put that advertising on. And then, as the salesperson, do we want to give a discount on there? And this is where the rules come in, because I can select yes and no, and that discount field is going to come or go. And this would have been nice earlier in the week when I filled out my insurance information. So let's give a discount of 11%, and you'll see that it calculates that discount right there as well. When do we just want to start that advertisement, some additional information, and we can come out and hit save. And that data would be written right into the list right here on the SharePoint list, and then it would process it right on to the next step. So it's a pretty basic form, but very, very easy to build. And where we get access to that form is right directly within that list. So if I open up the list itself, click on List within the ribbon, and you're going to see up here at the top that we have our Nintex Forms option right here at the top of the page. And what's nice about this is we can click on that one option after it's been installed into your environment, and the Nintex Form Designer is immediately going to open up and be available for you to start building out your form. And what's nice about this is when you open it up for the very first time, obviously I've built this form prior to coming in here, all the fields will just be stacked on top of each other just like this, because it takes all the columns in the list, it places them right on the form, and then you can just drag and drop those columns around on the form just like you would like to see them on the page. So that's why those project managers and business analysts have the ability to build something like this, because it is just drag and drop type of functionality. Now, we have a bunch of controls that are over here on the left-hand side, so if you wanted to add something like a button on the page, just simply drag it over, place it on the page where you'd like to have it. Maybe you'd like to have a submit button in addition to save. And each of the controls that you see here, you can just double-click on them, and you're going to get a configuration screen, and each control has its own configuration screen. But for this one, we could come and rename the button to just submit. And then we could also come down here and maybe send it to a redirect URL. A lot of times in SharePoint, well, I should say all the time in SharePoint, when you first fill out a form and hit submit, it takes you back to the list. You could have a scenario where you don't want the user to go back to the list. You want them to go back to the home page, or the page maybe that they came from where the shortcut was there. In my example of the insurance quote, if I would have filled out the online form, I wouldn't want to take the end user back to the list where all the insurance quotes would reside, because you wouldn't want me to see other employees entering items out there. So really nice to be able to do that. I'll click on the Save button, and you'll see that we now have a Submit button that's been renamed there for us. Now on the left-hand side, you'll see a lot of other controls that we have not, that we do not have within the list just yet. They're not list columns. And we've put some of them on this particular form, like the calculated value. Again, you can just drag and drop it over wherever you want it to be, and then you'll see the calculated values right here. So super easy to configure. Just click on them. You'll see the formula here. All the properties will be out there, so these are the form properties. But you can also go and look at the controls, runtime functions, any variables that you have on the form. Very easy to fill this out. And you'll see here I'm taking the package price and multiplying it by the discount, and that gives us our discount value on the form back here. So that's why you saw $440 on the discount. And we have a couple other things in case you want to put another choice control, date, time, geolocation. I'm a big fan of if you have a field service type of request, so that you can just click on the little button that says use your current location, and it populates it with the longitude and latitude. Back when I was on the consulting side, I worked with a company that did maintenance on windmills, and their offices were up in Pennsylvania where a lot of windmills are. And they used this form because the maintenance guys would go out and they would get into the windmill, and there was no address for the windmill. So in order to identify where it was at, obviously the windmills would have numbers on them, but they would just hit the longitude and latitude to identify right where they were when they did the maintenance request. And it was kind of a nice backup because just in case they would have selected the wrong windmill number, or maybe it was a new one that didn't have a number yet, they'd be able to go ahead and have that request out there. And we have a few other columns. So the image, which you see on here, labels, page breaks. We have an option to print to PDF. So if you want to determine where your PDF break is going to be, you can do that. Panels are really nice. We could place a panel on the form, and then you can put items directly within the panel. And what I love about this is if you combine a panel with a rule, that becomes very powerful because you can then take a panel and only allow certain users to see that panel. So in my example of the insurance quote, maybe you could only allow individuals who are in the HR distribution group to see that panel. And if that was the case, no one else would be able to see content within that panel unless they were HR. And then repeating section, I'm a big fan of this. I'll actually show you this one. Take that request that I made for a quote on an individual building. If you wanted to, you could allow your user to make a request for a quote on multiple buildings and just use the repeating section here. So multiple products that they wanted to select. So I'll hit the preview button. And because I put the repeating section control on the page and then put it in a preview, I'll be able to come out and select a building just like I did before, offer a discount or not, come in here and then select another building, offer another discount. So you'll be able to keep adding additional rows so that I can select multiple products in this example. Expense reimbursement's a very popular one because you'll come out and expense breakfast, then you'll need a new row for lunch, a new row for dinner, and keep going on as you add items onto the list there. And then what we talked about a little bit earlier as far as intuitive and easy and connected, we have our SQL request and web request down here. So in our example, the advertising package was actually a list lookup. It comes from another list. But if we wanted to, we could pull that data from SQL or another external database in our form. So that way, you can let those external databases be the authoritative copy of the data and pull it in here. That way you don't have to keep SharePoint or the form in sync with those other applications. And then we have a couple other options in here. That's the list lookup we talked about, manage metadata, and then all the list columns right here as well. And then we can do a few other things, import, export. If you love this form, I can export it and send it to you. We're very tightly integrated with SharePoint, so if I wanted to create a new column, just come over here and click on that. And for SharePoint users on the call, you'll see that familiar page or light box here where you can go and create that column and add it to the list. So a lot of features that you have in here in order to kind of build out your form and make it available to your end users. Now, one of the things that we've done is we've created a workflow and forms solution that sits outside the SharePoint platform. And we've done that for multiple reasons. Sometimes we run into customers that don't even have SharePoint. I think that's probably few and far between. But in the event that they don't, they can still leverage our platform. But one of the things is that you might want to do certain things that SharePoint and that platform just won't allow you to do. So if you think about something like SharePoint Online, one of the things that you cannot do with SharePoint Online is have an anonymous form. So let's say that you have a contact us page on your public-facing website, or feedback, or in that healthcare example, and I want to have a pre-registration form for your new patient. Those are all anonymous forms that you would want to have out there. Well, the Nintex Workflow Cloud allows you to have that anonymous form, and when you submit that form, the workflow can then write that data into your environment, which is really nice and really handy, and allows us to extend some of the functionality that you want to leverage within the SharePoint ecosystem. So I'll show you our form builder out within the Nintex Workflow Cloud. It's actually integrated in with the workflow, so the first event or action at the top of the workflow in this particular workflow is the form. So when I click on it, you'll see here that we're connecting it to the form. It's web enabled, available on the mobile device, and we can come in and design the form. This is a form that I built for the Ignite conference a couple months ago down in Orlando. And I did a demonstration where you could onboard a new customer in an insurance situation. And so this is the form that you would use. Now for the anonymous user, it looks like this. Now you could take this form and add some additional logos. You could embed it, as an iframe in your public-facing website, so you have, your header and footer and that kind of branding in there if you wanted to. But this is how we built the form. We literally take these controls and we drag and drop them over onto the form. So if we wanted to, I could put email right next to full name. Click on the control, and you'll see the configuration screen over here on the right-hand side. Now, if we wanted to make that item required or read-only, put some of that kind of grayed out text, that tooltip in the background. Very, very easy to be able to configure that particular form as needed. And in this example, I already have email on the form, so I'm going to delete that. But you'll see how that all responded. I didn't have to tell it to shrink down. It took up half the page and just formatted itself exactly as needed. And you'll see a lot of other features that we've added here in recent months, like the barcode. We've had the signature control, a lot of nice things that we can do, elements that we can put on the form. Modify the styles a little bit, so this has a blue theme. We could switch it up with orange or yellow, whatever you want it to be. We have a rules engine out here, and I love this because when you go out and build your form, you can build your form based upon these different scenarios. So you can have rules on form load. So when the form loads for the first time, I want X to happen. In one scenario, we're populating a name. On form input, when I start to input information in, we have a couple rules. And then we also have rules on submit. So once I submit the form, then I want rules to go into place. And these are super easy to configure because you can simply come out and give that rule a name. So I said show group. And all I'm doing is putting a rule in here that says evaluate this control, and the control name is checked to see if I'm a member. That's the little checkbox. And if it's equal to yes, then I'm going to take this entire group and make it visible. And notice that we give you the values of yes and no. That may seem easy, which it is, but in a lot of other solutions, it's just a blank, and you have to figure out, is the value yes, no? Is it true, false? Is it a 1? Is it a 0? What's that value? And we give you the values here. Because again, a non-technical user, if they're given a blank value, they don't know to type in yes or no or true or false. So we want to make it super easy and intuitive. And ultimately, we're going to change the visibility of that group, and it's going to be yes. So it's going to be visible. So really nice to be able to build out the forms, have variables, a lot of different things that we have out here in our form designer tool. We can even come out and add tabs, or we call them pages. I like to call them tabs to this form. So if we wanted to, we could add a couple more out here. So let's add tab 2, tab 3, or page 3. You can rename these if you want to. And I'm going to make them vertical or horizontal. Close out, and now I have tabs on the page. So when I click on page 2, I have a blank space now to put the controls in. And we already have the previous and next items that are out there. So that way, if you have a lengthy form, you can go ahead and add the tabs or pages right there. So really nice to be able to fill out this form, take the data, and start to do something with it. You'll notice on that form I didn't ask the user for their name, or not their name, but their address, their date of birth, driver's license number. None of that information I asked for. And that's because actually in this particular workflow, we're going to use an OCR engine to go and pull all that data out of the driver's license, since it's going to be the attachment. And once we pull it out, we'll actually use those items down here. So you'll see name, date of birth. We'll capture those as variables and then start to use them in the workflow. All right. So I think from a demonstration perspective, that's the bulk of what I wanted to show. So Ed, I don't know if you can present the PowerPoint presentation deck back there, and I'll summarize on a couple takeaways here at the very end here. So let's give this just a second to transition.
Refresh here in 1 second, Terry.
Yep, no problem. I appreciate the help there, Ed, on transitioning over to that. So a couple kind of key takeaways here that I wanted to reinforce, and I think hopefully we hit these and you got to see all of them. So when you're thinking about a new solution that you're going to have out there, think about anonymous forms. It's one of the things you witnessed today, and are you going to be able to use those in your new solution? Responsive forms you got to see, external data. Browser-based designer was one of the things that I wanted to highlight in this particular solution. We stayed within the SharePoint ecosystem for the SharePoint one, and we stayed within the Nintex Workflow Cloud, all within the browser. So you didn't have to have a local install of the form builder on your machine. You could be at a hotel and walk up to a kiosk desktop and be able to manage forms out there. So super easy. Think about the mobile app and the mobile views. Nintex offers a mobile app. So if you go out to your mobile phone right now and go to the App Store, you can download the Nintex mobile app and start using it. And if you think about it, that mobile app is going to give you offline accessibility to those forms. We have a lot of clients who need offline access to forms, and this has been a great and good service to those clients. Also, for those that are using InfoPath, I wouldn't necessarily advertise this to Microsoft, but a lot of folks have the enterprise license for SharePoint, and the only thing that they're using the enterprise license for is the InfoPath form feature. We've had a few clients that have rolled back to the standard version of SharePoint. They've saved a significant amount of money. Depends on the number of users that you have, but something to think about. Geolocation we talked about, touch support. All of our forms are responsive. They allow for touch support if you're on an iPad, phone, or even a desktop that has touch support. Managed metadatas we can support. jQuery, form and workflow variables are all there. That's very helpful with a dynamic form. Lookup fields, type ahead, so that when you go to type that email address or whatever it is in there, it's going to give you the suggested values. Also task forms. I didn't show you that within the Nintex Workflow Cloud, but that is extremely helpful because you can take an anonymous user. They can make a request, and as long as they've supplied their email address to you, you can assign tasks back to them and interact with them even though they're anonymous. And ultimately no code, and I think that's the obvious one here, is the no code type of solution here that we've got. And I think on the next slide here, I wanted to give you a couple more nuggets here. 3 pieces that you really want to pay attention to. If you don't know this, Nintex acquired a company here a few months ago called ProMap. Pretty excited about this acquisition and some of the acquisitions that are going to be coming here in the near future. But ProMap is a process management tool that allows you to document your requirements prior to building them. So we talk about being able to manage your processes, automate your processes, and optimize your processes. So with ProMap being in the Nintex family now, instead of using Visio to document your processes, you can now use our Nintex ProMap tool to document them, get everybody in agreement, and manage them. Use our workflow and forms tools to optimize that process. And then following that, you can come in and use our analytics tool to optimize the process. So it's not just about building them, it's also about optimizing them once you have them built. So really nice to see our platform kind of expand into that process management, automation, and optimization realm for what it is that you're doing. And so on the next slide here, I wanted to hit home a couple last points on my part here. One of the top reasons that I think most Microsoft customers end up choosing Nintex, actually several reasons here. We're probably the fastest way to go out and build apps. That's probably the biggest reason that folks select our tool is how easy it is to use. Very flexible, drag and drop. You're able to do advanced type of workflows. When you think about flow, those are more for personal tasks, smaller things that you want to do some things with. If you want to do state machines, multiple levels of approval, redlining of contracts, mature, sophisticated workflow processes, that's where you're going to leverage our tool set to be able to do that. On the form side, Power Apps, typically you're going to need a developer to build those. We're super easy to be able to do that. Also, we have one of the lowest cost of ownerships out there when you evaluate our tool. When you start to look at Flow and Power Apps, depending on the plan that you have, if you've got one of the correct E plans, maybe E3 through E5, you might have some of the advanced features in Flow or Power Apps. But overall, if you don't want to get into the $15, $40 per user plans, our plans are very competitive. We have one of the lowest total costs of ownership. Also, we have one of the highest satisfaction rates out there that you can look at when you look at our tool set. And I know I'm beating up Microsoft a little bit there, but Microsoft still loves us as well. We got a couple awards this year at the Ignite conference. Microsoft Office SharePoint Partner of the Year. We got a couple awards around workflow and forms. Workflow was awarded Best Overall App, and the Forms tool within 365 was Best or Most Business Value. And if you think about it, I love the fact that Microsoft has been investing a tremendous amount of resources in talking about process automation with Flow and Power Apps, and it's really shining a good light and getting folks talking about process automation in the platform. That's the space we live in, so I love that they're highlighting it because it brings a lot of attention to it. And we're happy to help support Microsoft in their quest to increase consumption and usage and features within Office 365 because our tool set's helping to do that. All right. So Ed, I think that is the last slide that I had. I think from there we'll jump into some Q&A. I'm not sure if we had any questions that were added into the chat chat window, so feel free to add some questions in there and we can go from there.
Don't see any questions now, so we'll give it a moment here to see if any can come in.
I think actually, since there's not a large group on here, I'm going to unmute people and allow you to just go ahead and throw out some questions if you'd like to.
Oh, that's perfect.
I'm going to try to do that here. Let's see here. So I'm going to post while we're covering this slide that if you guys want to move on to our survey, I posted that in the window. And if you want to fill out the survey, I know some of you may have more than one person in the room with you. You can each fill out the survey. That's what we're using to draw the winner for the Amazon gift card. So if you want to fill that out while we're talking here, Jessica's going to monitor that, and then we'll do the drawing here in just another couple minutes. Give everybody a chance to fill it out. But if you're interested in thinking more about automated workflows and forms, then we're happy to do a half-day envisioning session with you to kind of look at what are some of the forms and the workflows that you guys have going on in your organizations, and where would this fit, and what are the things that make the most sense for you, so you can envision this a little bit more and look at it and really try to see, does this make sense for you as a tool that works in your organization? So that's something that we're happy to do. We can look at how does this fit in terms of security, how will you maintain it, how complex is it, and what type of systems can you integrate with. And then we can also do a little more talking about one of the things that Terry talked a lot about is the fact that IT doesn't always have to own it, which I think for you, Dan, might be something of interest since you and Wayne don't necessarily want to do everything all the time. So, and for Ashley and some of the people at High Power is kind of interest as well, so that you guys are able to get your hands on some things and not have to bog down some of the other people. So we're happy to take a look at this if you're interested in it and help you dig a little deeper into what type of strategies might work for you around forms and workflow.